Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Hey everybody, I am Marielou Mandl, your host for On the Fly Filmmaking. Thank you for joining us again. I'm very excited today because our guest today is a first-time repeat customer, Jeff Hammer.
Hello.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, great to be back.
You've seen him on our show a few weeks ago with Personal Space. He was a producer of Personal Space, but today we're talking about the movie he directed and produced and wrote.
That's correct.
And wore all the hats.
I did wear all the hats, yes.
All the hats, which is awesome. That's exactly the type of filmmaker we like to talk to here on the Fly Filmmaking. So let's get started. First, before we talk about your current project, Live or Die in La Honda, I want to talk about how you got to this point, how you developed as a filmmaker to the point where you could produce a full feature-length movie. Like, were you always wanting to get into filmmaking?
No.
No, okay.
No, I took kind of a circuitous route out here. So
What route? What is this, a fancy word?
Oh, yeah. Circuitous. So I grew up always wanting and believing I was going to be a doctor.
Oh, okay.
And so, and that's what I did after college. I went to medical school. And partly just because of youth, partly just because I was cocky, I just thought that I could do medical school and everything else that I wanted to do, including writing. Like one of my majors in college was English, and I did a creative writing emphasis. So I started dabbling, but it was always kind of, all right, this will keep me well-rounded when I go pursue medicine. Mm-hmm. And then got to a point where, like, you know what, I love medicine, but I would rather do movies more, as crazy as that sounds.
So medicine was kind of a passion.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not as much as a passion as storytelling.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd put that, I would probably put it at 2 or 3 of things that I would most want to do. And I just think it's a career that if it's not number one, and clearly a number one, it's not worth the mental and physical sacrifice.
Yeah, because that's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
And so
that's something I always go back to whenever I'm like on set and we're like, we're filmmaking and then something goes wrong and everybody's stressed out. I was like, but we're not saving lives here. It's a movie. Like, we're having a great time. But like, I feel like when you're on doctor level, yes, you are saving lives. You need to be stressed out.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. Like, I think it's a good reality check. I also did some nonprofit work, before that just has always kept me like, very level-headed. And like, I love, movies, and I love like, trying to do all of this, but I also realize it's just like a big privilege. And if it all went away, like I could find something else. But I'm glad I don't have to.
Yeah.
And so after, I left with a year to go in medical school, so you can debate the wisdom of that. And then
and like, isn't medical school is like a long time, right?
It's 4 years
okay,
after college.
It's 4 years, so you did 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you have to do training after that, as well.
Okay.
And so, I was in rotations, like I delivered babies, like I scrubbed in on surgeries. So like, I definitely did some of the hands-on stuff, always under supervision, of course. It just got to the point where everyone finds their own way, to like, really wanting to pursue film. And I probably would have gotten to it sooner, except that I just grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. I didn't know anyone who did anything like this.
Yeah.
And so there was just no real kind of trajectory of how to do it. But when I left medical school, like, I drove around the country for a while just to collect my thoughts, and then I came back and wrote my first script, and that was kind of the launch pad. And then I used that to get into USC's MFA screenwriting program, and so left one graduate program to come out to another one.
Yeah.
But it was, it was mostly great. I mean, it. When you do medical school, like, by comparison, everything is like a lot easier and less hard. And so I was able to like completely pour myself into this and make sure that I was productive as possible during that time. And then I helped, the program helped me hone, my craft. I got better, just surrounding yourself with other film students and other writers. I mean, part of the coursework is always workshopping, and so you see other people writing things, you're writing your own stuff, you're constantly reworking it, getting better, so on and so forth. And then as soon as you leave, you learn all this great like theory and practice in film school, but there's little to no like business, like that's
the business
taught
of film
with it.
stuff. Yeah.
And so the reality is most people leave film school and they never get to pursue exactly what they went to film school for. And a lot of people, especially in LA, they just leave, and so it's it can be a tough town. And you know, just got close on, you know, things like, you know, would develop something, you know, with a production company, you know, sometimes they'll get in a studio. But most of the time, you know, the meetings don't like, you know, go anywhere. And sometimes they do. And you start moving forward. And then it stops. And eventually you just got to the point where I was like, I just don't want to wait for someone else to tell me that I can make a movie. And so I just, when I was taking a break from LA, my wife was doing a fellowship up in the Bay Area for 3 years. And so it was a chance for me to kind of like unplug from LA, even though I was going back pretty regularly. Like, you know, I still had a writing fellowship that I, you know, got while I was like up in the Bay. So I was going back and forth a bunch. But it also gave me time just to like decompress and write a bunch more new stuff. And then I just knew that we were going to head down to LA after she was done with her fellowship. And I'm like, all right, I would like to be coming back with a movie in the can.
Yeah, because at 3 years away from LA, that's like you can really put in some good time.
Yeah,
because when you're in LA, like you're in like the wheel, so it can be hard to like get your project going here. But if you can like if you have some kind of job or a family thing that pulls you away from LA, you can put some good work in.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a ton while I was up in La Honda. I mean, it's only like a town of like 1,000 people, and it's mostly a one intersection town. So it's like, you know, very quiet, you know, even though you're right by Silicon Valley, it's like this sleepy oasis. It kind of reminded me of like the North Woods of Wisconsin, except that it's redwoods and like, you know, lower mountains, and the ocean's 10 minutes away.
Right.
And so I did a bunch of writing there, you know, I was in my writing fellowship, and then it's like, all right, if I'm going to make something, like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to try to find something that is too ambitious for me to pull off. Like, you know, I wanted to have like some production value. I wanted to look like I had more money than I did, but I needed to be like really realistic about it.
Yeah.
Like Rebel Without a Crew, like a lot of filmmakers have read, you know, Rodriguez's book. I really took from that, like, you know, write for what you have and not for what you want, like, you know, early on. And so just kind of play to your strengths, and that's kind of how it happened. Like, you know, with this movie, I just was tired of waiting, and then I found a story that I could tell that I thought I could do like fairly well and do it inexpensively, and then do it in this kind of sleepy, you know, community where I could hopefully get a whole bunch of community support because it's so small.
And I bet that you did.
I did.
Yeah, which is really great, which is something that we've brought up on the show a few times for like our audience that is in Wisconsin that has no guidance as to how to do this. Like, you kind of can use that to your advantage because people want to participate and help.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that people in La Honda, you know, even though it's California, it's not LA. No one's like, you know, doing stuff like this.
Which is so crazy. Like when I first moved to LA, I was like, oh my gosh, all of Los Angeles, all of California is Hollywood. But you go like 20 minutes north of like where we are right now, and we're like, you're in Chatsworth, and they don't care. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you know, there's farmland around here. There's just, you know, there's people who do, I mean, LA has every single job in the world that you could imagine. And so even though, yes, there's a bunch of people doing film here, there's more people who are doing everything else. And it's just like, oh, I like movies.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, oh, wait, they're shooting. It's more of like a nuisance than.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, those filmmakers are out there doing it again. So yeah, utilize your resources, use what you have, write for what you have, and film with what you have. And I think that you said that on your website there, that you were like thinking in the writing process of, well, this is what I have at my disposal, so let me make this kind of movie.
Yeah, exactly. So I looked at it. I really wanted it to get like distributed, and so I had some other ideas that I felt like I could have written to go along with it. But if you make a movie, you want to make like another one, and the only way to make another one, unless you're just rich and it doesn't matter,
is to make money off of this one.
Is to at least get it out there, like show people that you've done it. And so I kind of did the market research, and it's like horror or thriller are the two things. If you don't have actors that everyone recognizes, and if you don't have like, you know, a big budget.
But you went film noir.
I did, and so I went like, you know, kind of the thriller aspect, but did like, you know, noir storyline, just because I've always liked noir, and I've always just particularly like that genre. Yeah. Like, unfortunately, I didn't have, you know, the time and the resources to give it the look that I ideally would have wanted to do for noir, but I definitely kept with the story points, like, you know, very much along the tropes. And so I own a ton of movies, and so I watched, I want to say, somewhere between 20 and 25 of the noirs that I have, and I just took notes and like, okay, what happens and when are these people introduced? Like, you know, when is the first person like who dies? And so like it's different every single story, but I was just trying to, with my science background, as a way to like kind of do like pattern recognition. It's like, okay, this seems to be the time that you should introduce, this sort of character, and this should be the time that, this happens, and, this is like when you should see your first death that's not part of the central aspect of the story.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to that. Like, and I think that's really great advice for anybody who's trying to write a kind of movie, is research that type of movie, take some notes, and like look for some patterns. You don't have to necessarily go with that, but you can utilize that to your benefit.
Yeah, I've always felt like structure is really helpful, with and maybe that's just because like how we were taught.
And you
at
also
USC.
teach screenwriting.
And I do teach
Yes.
screenwriting as well. Like I came back to USC.
Yeah.
And so it makes a whole lot of sense to me. But I also feel like structure really helps like free up the story, because it gives you kind of like signposts that you're supposed to. You can get there any number of different ways, but there should be. It's like when you're skiing downhill, like you know that there's these marks that you have to get around,
Right.
and you can do whatever
In between there.
yeah whatever you want in between there, but you got to hit those marks, and then just continue like downhill of the story.
Yeah. Like you got to plan for the fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hit the posts on the way down the hill. I love the skiing thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. So let's take a look at the trailer for Live or Die in La Honda.
Okay.
What do you want, Vic?
I need your help.
I could have sworn I heard gunshots coming from your place last night.
I thought we agreed it would be better if we didn't see each other.
Brian went missing a few days ago. You must think I'm a really horrible person.
I don't think you're a horrible person, Vic. It's just you and I, when we get together, it's like we're like live wires.
Yeah, but you must admit the sparks are pretty exciting. Come to La Honda.
Why ask me up here to do something that you can handle yourself? What are you not telling me?
There's a lot of things I'm not telling you.
You're the first dead man to ever buy me a beer.
Who sent you?
Awesome. That is Live or Die in La Honda. You can watch that all over the internet, Amazon, iTunes, a whole bunch of other places that you can stream that. So definitely check it out. I was super impressed, first off, by how good it looked.
No, thank you.
You're a cinematographer. Did you do cinematography? No, somebody else did that.
No, Mike Revalvalki was the DP.
Did it.
Yeah.
It was so good. And then like that really, for me, just like kept me in the story.
Oh, I can't wait for him to see this interview then.
Yeah. Oh, like you guys have beef?
No.
Okay.
No,
No,
we're
I
buddy now,
loved it.
just,
I thought it
like,
was beautiful. Like there's one shot in particular where he's sitting on the beach and the sunset's happening, and it's just like of course the sunset's beautiful, but it's hard to capture sunset. Like I film things, and it's hard to capture that and see the guy as well. And like I was like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Whoever's doing that. So
yeah, Mike's
fantastic find.
Mike's great. Like one of the harder working people that I've ever come across. He's Bay Area crew. Most of the crew ended up being from the Bay Area.
Nice.
He came as a recommendation from another filmmaker who's up there, a guy named Ryan Baxter, who has a great movie called Green is Gold that is all over the place. Like you can check it out on Netflix. Really good movie. And he is like friends with my brother-in-law. And so we met, and then he was kind of my connection to people in the Bay Area. And he introduced me to Mike because Mike shot his movie, Green is Gold.
Nice.
And then it ended up being, I want to say 5 or 6 people who were on Green is Gold ended up like coming onto my movie.
Oh, good, because they grew up. They stick together.
Yeah. Like 2 of the actors that are in my movie, like were in Green is Gold as well. And so,
Nice.
yeah, it worked out.
Good. And they already have like a way of communicating with each other, so that's kind of nice to do. Another thing production-wise that I was really into was the editing, and you used a lot of split screens in there. Was that a choice because of noirs, or was that you? Was it the editor brought that and you're like, I like this?
That actually came later. That's a perfect example of how like the final rewrite is in the edit. And so the very beginning, how the movie opens up, was not how it was originally written. And so changed that a little bit. And then because we were so limited with our crew and equipment, so Mike and his partner Elliot, who was the gaffer on this, they had a grip truck that they owned for a while until it recently died. So we had like a decent amount of equipment, but not like, a huge amount of equipment. I think it was like a 2-ton, like, grip truck, which is good for us. But like we had no dollies, like, we had like, very, very little in the way of stuff because we just didn't have the time to get it done. And so with that said, you just gotta, improvise, like, as you
on the fly. You have to film stuff on the fly, like the title of our show.
On the fly. I mean, like it was always like there were storyboards and we had everything kind of like, planned out, but it was limited in terms of what we can do because it was Elliot as the gaffer and then Danny Lorch was the key grip, and then that was it. Like we had 2 ACs, like, our first AC had just graduated from high school, and then the second AC, she was still in college, at the time, and so we just kind of made do with what we had, and just kind of rolled with it. We got a good camera, but
what did you guys shoot this on?
Red Epic.
Red Epic.
Yeah.
Good camera, and you got to have somebody who knows how to use these things.
Yeah, and Mike fit that bill.
Yeah, that's good. And then like it seems like the rest of your crew seemed to work really well together. Did you have a very, very big crew?
It wasn't that big. I would say it fluctuated a little bit during the main time, but I would say like about 18 to 20. Like,
okay.
And for most of the crew, I would say, I mean, it's true for the cast and the crew. I mean, there was 5 or 6 professional actors that I, hired on this, but otherwise all the other people that you see in the movie, it's the first time they've ever been in anything, not just like a feature, but like a short or, period. And the same with the crew. There was about 5 pros, like, who had time, but, true with low budget filmmaking, you take favors where you can get it. And so there was a number of years that I taught to support myself, like, before I could be solely like, a filmmaker. And I actually brought on former students of mine who were in college. And in most cases, they had never done what they were going to do before, but I just knew that they could do it.
Right.
So, for some of the experienced crew, at first it was a little bit of a like reality check. It was like, I remember the AD, he was one of the few people who came up from LA. And so our first AD came up and he had never met me or anyone else. And it had been the first job he'd been on in a while. And so when he was calling, like, the second AD, she's like, well, I'm in college. I haven't really like done this, before.
Yeah.
She's done some stuff.
So
when he called the script supervisor, he's just like, I don't even know what a script supervisor is. But but I knew, like, like in Roy's case, who was our scripty, like, I had him, like, with my science background, I taught some science. I'm like, Roy, I've seen your physics notebook. You can be a script supervisor. Like, you just take it, a little bit of time and you can, like, learn this. And that's how it was for a lot of people. I think I had 7 former students on this, and I just put them in roles because I got to see them in the classroom. I'm like, okay, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. I know I'm going to need this. And a couple other people, like, floated. So it really was just a bunch of rookies who really didn't know what they were doing. And down to my mom and my mother-in-law, like, were the caterers and like were there for like, the whole time.
Yeah.
And,
oh my gosh, moms are so good for that stuff.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And even, my mother-in-law's dog was there, and like he's such a lovable guy. So we had a set dog as well.
That's awesome. And that's something that folks that live in cities that don't have crew that you would typically look for. Like, you can't go onto Craigslist and look for your first AD, but you can call your friend that's really organized, and you can work your crew around that way. You can. I mean, every position, I mean, to be clear, it's better to have pros in every position, but you don't always have the luxury. Yeah,
and
you don't have that option.
So I looked at it and like, I knew that I wanted an AD, like, who was a pro, the DP, obviously, a sound person, and a gaffer. And as I'm going through, I mean, Danny had done some grip work, but other than that, and like our stunt coordinator, like, I think everyone was just a rookie, like, the first time that they were doing this. That's
great. And I think there's a few different guests that we've talked to when we talk about their introduction into filmmaking. They were doing something completely different, and somebody that they knew were making a project, and they're like, I think you could do this. And then it turns into a whole career for them. So you could change lives.
Well, that's the hope.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a good time, you know, regardless.
Yeah. Okay. So on your website, on the main page, you have one little post that's about how you shot the opening with 5 people.
Yes.
So talk to me about that experience.
So I shot the opening as kind of a proof of concept, and I knew, and I wasn't even done with the script yet. I had the general idea, and we shot that a year before we shot the vast majority of the footage. And so it was a way to put together a little bit of a proof of concept, have an opening that I knew wasn't going to involve the main actors, and get that to like drum up some interest. And I ended up using it for my crowdfunding page, and I used it, you know, for some other people just to show that, okay, here's what it looks like up there. Because again, you can say La Honda, you can say Silicon Valley, Santa Cruz Mountains, and it doesn't, like, until you actually see it, it's different.
You don't feel that this weird mountain town feel.
Right.
Like it's really, and having a proof of concept as your opening is not something that's like strictly to indie films. Like Deadpool did that.
Sure.
You know, like
Sure.
having something short like that can actually help you get your funding. Like you can get together and make an opening.
Yeah, and that's what I did. And so like, so all the motorcycle footage, because I knew that, like, ideally you want to do this, like, you know, where you're, you have the budget for, like, you know, union, like, safety regulations, and you can, like, hire police officers to, like, you know, shut down roads and everything, and we just didn't have that. And so partly it was just to keep, like, a small, like, you know, footprint, because, you know, as the footage shows, and we have a whole bunch more driving footage than, like, what the opening shows, it's a 2-lane road that switchbacks back and forth, like, you know, up into the Santa Cruz Mountains, like, you know, through redwoods, and there's a lot of blind turns, and so you just don't have places to actually be. And so part of what I was doing, almost like shot listing, because I had to drive that all the time. I would go up, and anytime you would go over the hill and come back down, that's the way. That's the one road. And so I just started paying attention. Like, okay, well, we could pull over here, and then, like, this would look nice, and we could do this, and this would look nice. And so it really was Ryan, the guy who did Green is Gold, and so it was his camera, and then he shot some of that. So it was just kind of, so he did shoot like a little bit of footage, like, you know, with the motorcycle stuff. And then the sound guy was the local postal worker, Jack Mullins, who has like a small role in the movie. He's one of the barflies, and then you see him, he's got a song in the movie, and then you see him performing with his band at the end. Yeah. And I put out like a little blurb in the monthly newsletter, the La Honda Voice, and he was one of the first people to reach out to me. It was him and Donna Pichon, and so she's got the house with all the artwork that's featured in the story. And then so like 2 people who ended up being, like, you know, huge helps to the movie reached out from this like little monthly newsletter. And Jack's a musician, he's done like some sound work. I'm like, I know you've never done like movie sound work, but I can get you a kit, and I can get it to you the night before, play around with it, and just learn how to record the sound. Yeah. And that's how we did it. So it was Ryan and Jack and me, Ryan on camera, Jack on sound, and me. And then my buddy Tom was in a car around blind corners on walkie, just letting us know, like, if anyone was coming and if we needed to get out of the way. Yeah. And Tom also plays he's one of the barflies in the movie. And he wrote a song specifically for the movie. It's like what opens and like closes the movie. It's this guitar instrumental. So like literally his first exposure to the movie was sitting in a car for the better part of 12 hours, just around like blind corners. He'd just be like, we're good.
That's
we're good.
rad.
And then Daniel on the motorcycle. And he was a teacher that I was like, I couldn't find someone to do a motor. It's an important role, but it wasn't a huge role. And so I wanted someone who was like old enough to be like responsible on a motorcycle, but like, you know, young enough to like, you know, play, you know, the part. And I just couldn't find anyone because the people who were young enough and like responsible like had jobs. Right. So they couldn't come and do this because I didn't want to do it on the weekend because those roads are way too busy and there's so many cyclists. Right. It's a cycling mecca around there. So we wanted to do it crack of dawn on a weekday and to pull off like a lot of this stuff and then just kind of slowly make our way. And then fortunately, Daniel is a teacher and had summer off where he was getting paid anyway. Right. And he's like, oh, I haven't ridden my motorcycle in a while. This would be awesome.
Oh, that's like, great.
And then it turned out he actually looked like Lily Bourdain, like our lead actress, and they're supposed to be siblings in it. So it was kind of like a stroke of good luck there.
That's awesome. Yeah, so then like it's just all the pieces falling together.
Yeah.
That's great. So I love that you've mentioned even here, like people that had different roles and different people in La Honda contributed in different ways. So I think it was really fascinating that the music is a lot of it from people who are in like musicians from La Honda.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you find them?
I mean, again, La Honda's a small town. There's only like a handful of places to go.
You just like, I could imagine you walking through like the one intersection. You're like, hey, what do you do? Like, what's your art? Okay, great. We're going to use it.
There is a little bit of that. Like, you know, once they get to know you, I mean, it takes a little bit of time for the folks who, like, there's a joke in La Honda, you're not a local until you're there for 7 years.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Then you really belong. So this song that's playing now, this is the one that's the opening?
Yep. This is Tango La Honda that Tom Romero wrote.
And this one was custom for the movie.
Yep. This is the only one that was written specifically for it. And so, yeah, Tom's like a good friend. And back when I was teaching, like he and Daniel both teach at the high school where I was working in the Bay Area while I was up there, and Tom's like a music teacher, and so all he does is like, you know, play music and help, like, you know, I don't want to say all he does, but like music literally is how he's made his career. And it was just like I showed him a script like early on, and he's like, I didn't ask him to write a song, he just came back, he's like, this might work, you know. I think, you know, this might work for like, you know, the last scene. And then I agreed. And
it was really great. Like, it sets the tone, it bookends the movie. And I think it's really great that was like, if you're going to have one piece that was made specifically for the movie, it's a really strong selection. And the other ones were songs, you said the locations in the movie are real, like the bar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so when I was writing it, I didn't write any scenes in, because they're all real locations. And so I didn't write anywhere in there until I spoke to the owner and got permission, like preliminarily at least, and said, I would like to do this. Would this be okay? Would you allow me to do this? And then we had to like figure out exactly like how I would, you know, make it work logistically. But like, fortunately, they were all like really great about it. They were all like, you know, really cool. And they said, yeah, absolutely. So then when I went in, because I knew that Applejacks, for example, like, you don't need a production designer to touch it. Like, you know, it's
gorgeous. Yeah, like, it's perfect.
It's this perfect little gem of a dive bar that, you know, used to be an old lumber mill that was built in the 1870s. And now it sucked when people were walking on the floor and it blew up sound takes. But like, you know, there was so many other things, you know, that like, you know, worked with it. And it's kind of like, you know, the town meeting place, like, you know, that in the market, like, you know, across the street. And so I actually did a lot of work, like sitting in a corner booth, like in Applejacks. And so, yeah, I mean, that's there. Like Sandra. There's my friend Mandy. So she's one of the non-locals. Like, I grew up with Mandy, and I'm just like, this song will fit with, you know, La Honda, you know, as well. But otherwise, pretty much the entire soundtrack was people that I saw either playing at Applejacks or the San Gregorio store, which is a really funky, I don't even know how to describe it because it's just so bizarre, but it also has a bar within this little tourist shop. And so that's like the first bar that you see like in the movie. And then there's a couple different scenes that take place there. And so they always have music on the weekend, like always like, you know, matinee music. And then Applejacks, the whole time I was there, pretty much every Friday and Saturday night, there was always music. And so especially when I decided that I was going to do this, then I really started looking more focally to look at, okay, who would work for this? Like, you know, who would have the right sound for this? Because I wanted it to be like, you know, more like rock and roll, you know, a little bluesy rock and roll, a little bit of country rock and roll, but, you know, rock and roll, because that's just more of like, you know, how La Honda is. And then it was just a matter of whether I thought that it would work for the movie and if I just liked it. And so I just started buying, like, you know, the local CDs of people.
How did you play it? What's a CD? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, so like, you know, in this one, this is Bundy Brown, and Bundy plays with a couple different, you know, bands in the area. But this is one with the espresso rhythm section. And I knew that this is like the one song I wanted when Blake and Vic kind of reunite for the first time. Because I thought thematically, I mean, it's it's got the right like groove to it. But I also thought like lyrically it worked well for what like the scene was supposed to be about. And Bundy's like great, like he was low key. And I just remember the first time that I like formally met him, because we met a couple of different times, but like formally met him was at a party at the Pachone house. And again, that's the house with all the artwork at the end. And we just got to talking, and it's like, you know, asking, he's like, hey, it sounds far out, man. Just let me know.
Like a little hippie town that's just like so game to be part of your movie.
Yeah.
Which is great. Like, has there been any response yet to the movie from people of La Honda?
Yeah, for the most part, it's been favorable. I did do there's only been 2 public screenings of the movie. Like, one was the film festival premiere. And then the other one, I did a benefit screening in La Honda, and we watched it outside under the stars. And then all the money went to the local elementary school.
That's
'cause that's where most of the... There's a bunch of fundraising things that happen there, and it's almost always either to the fire department or the elementary school.
Yeah, pay it forward, because it seems like it's a real community of a place. It's not just this little town that happens there. It's
they've got
a real community.
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I were sad to leave. I mean, we knew we had to come back down to LA. It's just easier down here. But part of me was just like, I don't really want to leave, because I just felt
Well, now you're forever part of La Honda.
Yeah, to an extent. And I still go up there at least once a year. Like, I was at the La Honda Fair, the last 2, they have an annual fair, and I'm probably going to go up again, this year. Yeah, I mean, we were there for 3 years, and made some friends there, and people I'm still keeping in touch with, and even people that I don't know that well. If I go to La Honda, within 5 minutes, I'm going to run into people.
Yeah,
because it's
that tight knit.
Yeah, it's like, post office, market, Apple Jacks. If you're in that little
that's the
triangle,
the city circle.
Yeah.
So then, logistically, because you're going to a place and you're asking for permission from private business owners, did you have to do much with permitting?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that it's not formal permits that LA typically requires you to do.
Right.
Now you can get around it in LA because there's just so much going on, but it's better to have a permit.
Yeah, if you can get it and you can go the appropriate route, then that's great. But
up there, I didn't. What I did, though, and what you need to make sure to do if you are an indie filmmaker, and a lot of people forget this, is that you do need signed permission from the owner of the business or the building. And so, in the case of again, like Apple Jacks and Dewart's and San Gregorio store were the big ones in the area, and so it's just a matter of having an agreement that states this is what I will do, and if I break something, I'll pay for it. And but people up there are just cool, you can just come in here, for the it was come here and you can shoot it for free, just work around our business hours and make sure that you put things back where you found them, and all basic stuff. But yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge was trying to shoot around business hours and trying to make that work, especially at Apple Jacks, because we are there for so many scenes.
Right, and that's a fully running bar. They open from noon to 2 a.m. probably.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit fluid in the close times, if it's earlier in the week. But it was just something where, for the overnights, because out of the 12 main days that we shot this, 6 of them we were in Apple Jacks for at least part of it. And then on the overnights, I just had to promise that I would only be there on a Monday or Tuesday night, because it was a little slower. And then I still felt bad because a couple of people that I would see there, who are just kind of the regulars, would get in and they get sent away.
Oh, and they're where are they going to go? There's no other bar.
I mean, fortunately, they knew that it was a short, shoot, and so it'd be a minor inconvenience. But yeah, I mean, I felt bad, but we really couldn't get into Apple Jacks and close it down until at 10:30 at the earliest, and then there's nothing you can do about the sun coming up. And so with certain things,
can't stop that.
Right, and so there's enough windows in the bar, and so we didn't have the amount of crew where we could just black out everything, and so we just had to hustle. And just really, make it, work. And so we could get away with some of the exteriors of Apple Jacks while I was still open. But as soon as we had to go interior, we had to, shut it down just for legal reasons. You can't be serving alcohol while stuff's going on.
Yeah.
Not to mention, a bunch of my crew was under 21, so it couldn't be legally open.
Yeah.
And then one of the ways that got around that is my regular bartender, Pat. I just arranged with the owner and said, on these overnight shoots, you're gonna want someone who looks over the bar. Can we have Pat?
Yeah.
I got to know Pat fairly well, and he's got a small role in the movie as well.
That's great. He made it in the movie.
That's right. He's one of the Apple Jacks bartenders.
Yeah.
And so that's how we did it. And it was Pat was born and raised in La Honda, so everyone people knew who I was by the end of there. But it was also just nice to have one of the true locals, who's been there for decades.
That's awesome. I love your utilization of the resources of La Honda. And leading up to this, you mentioned that you did crowdfund for this. So let's chat a little bit about that. What did you do? So you used your opening sequence.
Yes.
As part of your crowdfunding. You did Indiegogo?
Yes.
Cool. So how was that experience?
it was a big learning experience. Like,
Had you done it before?
No, I'd never done it before. I knew that people had been doing it. When I first decided that I was going to try to crowdfund, all I knew about was Kickstarter, and then I just saw that there was a few other options, and I opted for Indiegogo because of their like flexibility. Like Kickstarter is like an all or nothing, which has its pros and cons. But because I'd never done it before, like I wanted to set a goal, and I didn't want to be shut out if I didn't, make it.
What was your goal that you
I
posted
wanted to
initially?
raise like 50,000, and in hindsight, that was like way too high.
What did you end up making?
Just under 20.
Oh, that's still great.
So it was still like a good start, but knowing what I know, like I would have just set it for 20, and I would have hired different consultants. So I hired some consultants, and they ended up, it was a waste of money.
Right.
But
there are good ones out there. Like
there are good ones.
When you were on the show a few weeks ago, we had the team from Personal Space. They also do crowdfunding consulting as well.
Right. If I knew them at the time, I would have hired them without hesitation.
So that's like, that was interesting to me because I didn't know that this was a service. Like, but I assume like everything is a service, but I had never talked to people who do that. And so, yeah, you want to like research that. And I'm sure that there's reviews and places you can reach out to be like, was this successful or not? So what was it about the service you went with that didn't work?
Well, it was kind of a classic sense of like, overpromise and underdeliver. And so it's like, if anyone asks you to pay up front, especially like in independent filmmaking, it's like most of the time you should just run the other way.
Yeah.
Like you can't run fast enough. I mean, I understand like, the standpoint of people who want to get paid up front because like they don't want to like, work for nothing.
Yeah.
But I don't understand people who won't have any sort of like performance incentive, that comes on this. And so with the company that I ended up going with, what they sold me on was they had ways to access like tens of thousands of people, like, that are in their data stream that they could like, market to. And then if there was even like a 0.25% conversion rate, that would easily get us to like, what we had gone for. And it just ended up being not anywhere close to that. I want to say that I had just under 300 backers, and I went back and like tracked every single person who donated and what day that they donated, and like all but like 5 of them I could track like from me sending an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and like that's how it happened. And then a couple people, there's a town Yahoo group or town email group for La Honda, and so some people that I didn't, so some people I didn't know, and I thought that I was just getting them randomly. I'm like, oh no, I got them through the town email group, and so essentially I got all the money, raised for it, and I could have just saved the money that I paid. I mean, it was the worst money I spent on the movie by far. Whereas if I would have gone with the people that I met later, they are performance-based. And so like they're very realistic with you, and they will take a commission of what you raise, but they will not get paid until the crowdfunding campaign is over. And so they self-select who they want to work with. If they think that you're crazy and you're just not going to hit your goal, then they'll either lower your goal for you, or they just won't work with you.
Right.
And so then in that case, that they're not just going to click buttons and just do a little bit of like, work, maybe farm out some work to some interns, and then just kind of check out and like, cash your check.
Right. So if you have like 2 or 3 tips that you can give to our indie filmmakers at home for using crowdfunding, what would you give them?
During the campaign, it's a full-time job. Like you're going to have to do a lot of work on your own, unless you hire people that you really, trust and like, are the right sort of consultants that will like actually manage your campaign. You should be expecting to do work on it every single day. And that's, from responding, like as soon as someone donates, you should send a thank you email, like, pretty quick. And it's just like, having like a strategy of like, monitoring the page. Number 2, like create a whole bunch of content that should all be done before you launch. And so this is like individual, so not just like, the big video that everyone looks at, but supplementary content. So whether it's having a graphic designer do like, GIFs for you, and to do like, other, JPEGs and other, just artwork that you can put on there, whether it's having like, small, like, interview clips with key cast members or key crew members. Any of this stuff is like helpful because you want to put out something new every single day, and ideally like, maybe 2 new things every single day. Yeah. And you can recycle some of like, the pictures that you put up, but you always want to keep putting it out there just to keep it fresh in people's mind. And then 3, really have a realistic goal of how much you can make. And so part of it is you want to talk to people ahead of time, because the vast majority of money that you make are typically in the first couple days and the last couple of days. And then there's this big lull in the middle. So you need to have a bit of a strategy. And if there's some people who are going to be heavy hitters for you, for example, maybe have them hold off and give it like a shot in the arm, like, when some of the days are lagging. Yeah, I would say like those are, the big ones. But it's a lot of work, and you should really talk to someone who's done it before and like, has some expertise. Yeah, and then I can't stress enough, if you have a consultant that wants to get paid up front, just
don't do it.
Just don't, especially if they don't want to change a legal agreement.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good tip there, is like look out for those red flags. You know, it's just like with actors who are like getting with agents, and they're like, the agents are like, cool, you're going to pay me this much for me to be your agent. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Back away as fast as possible.
Yep.
Awesome. So we haven't talked to anybody on this show yet about getting their movie onto like Amazon and iTunes and things like that. How has that experience been so far?
It's been its own learning experience.
Yeah.
Like distribution is completely different than like filmmaking. I mean, it's filmmaking in the sense that it's part of the business, but it's something that I just kind of learned on the fly.
Yeah.
And again, I got some help with some reps who helped me get the movie in front of like different distributors. And I think for this time through, it was helpful, because I wouldn't have known exactly. I mean, I know a number of the distributors, but the people that I ended up going with, like, I didn't know who they were, ahead of time, and it just ended up being like, a good fit. So in my case, my domestic distributor, and so that's everything in North America, is a company called Freestyle Digital Media, and they are part of a larger umbrella.
Okay.
So they have a couple different parts of their company, but it's all like, in film and distribution. And so once they decided to make an offer for my, movie, and I accepted, then it's their job to go take it out to the variety of different platforms. And then I knew right from the beginning that I didn't want to do a theatrical run. It was just too small with it. And I think a lot of filmmakers really want to see it like on the big screen, because that's how we shot it that way, and that's how we want to see it. But that isn't really how people consume their media anymore either. That's a big part of it, but it doesn't make good financial sense, because if you have a movie and you want to do like, the traditional, like get it in for like, a week in the theaters and then get it into 10 markets so that you can do, there's certain like distribution, like, markers that it hits. But most of the time you're just losing money on those 10 theaters because you don't have the marketing budget to get enough people out there to like, make it, worth your time. So I just looked at it. I wanted it like a strict, like, VOD, release. And I had done like a little bit of the research. I'm like, it's fine. Like, I'm very proud of the movie. But I looked at it from the get-go, and it's like, this is like a VOD release. Like, I don't want to make something and pretend that it's something that it isn't. Yeah. And so once Freestyle came on board, then it's their job. And so they are the ones who did all of the negotiations with Amazon and iTunes and YouTube and
because I always wonder, like, where does it come up, like, how much your movie is? Like, so I saw you're up for $3.99 in most, like,
$3.99 or $4.99, depending on So
like, where does that get decided? That's with the distribution company, right?
Yes. So for the most part, there's just I mean, most movies when you rent them are roughly the same price. And so I don't know why they set my movie for a certain price, versus another one, but it's like within the ballpark. And so so that's not me. And then so that's just Freestyle for right now. And then I have a foreign sales team as well. And so they were at Berlin. They're going to be at Cannes. And so I don't know what markets it's going to be in yet, but it will be like, in some like other worldwide markets. But that's, again, like, that's their job, and they figure that out. And I get updates as necessary.
Gotcha. So then to now wrap us up here, because you are a creative, you started in like a medical field, and then you changed careers, went into filmmaking. You're a writer, you're creative, you're a filmmaker, you're doing it now. What advice do you have for our folks, like young you sitting in Wisconsin without the resources or understanding of what to do next? What kind of advice do you have for them?
first and foremost, I mean, it's something where you gotta like go all in. I think I had just read something from like, Richard Linklater. It's like an old, thing that, he said, but it's just like he can tell like right away if someone's gonna make it or not. Because he's like, it's like, oh, you kind of like movies. It's like you don't live and breathe. And so if it's not something that like, really, it just rattles around you and just will not go away. Yeah. I mean, choose another job. I mean, as much as I love it and I love, the process and like when you're actually making it, it's like the greatest thing ever. But so much of this business is like frustration and rejection. And so there's a lot of that. So just make sure first and foremost, you really want to do it. Yeah. Because if you don't love it, it's not worth it. Even if you make it huge, it's just not worth it if you don't love it. Now, assuming that you do love it, then just don't wait for people. Like, make your, like, I'm very big Robert Rodriguez fan in the sense, like, make your own movie, even if it's a piece of shit. Like, go out and make, you don't have to show people, but you will learn something, if not many things, about doing, this process. And, with that, maybe you'll find some of your people. And if not, you'll gain experience. And then sooner or later, you probably, I mean, you can make something anywhere. But it's probably at some point you're going to come out to LA. Like if you really want to make a career out of it, this is the mecca of filmmaking, not just for the country, but of the world. And I know that you can go to New York and Chicago and and Atlanta is now like a big hub, but it's all still centered in LA. There's
decisions get made here, right? Then they get shot out.
And there's just so many people out here that you can network with. And I mean, it's a big, lonely city, like in some cases, but it also shrinks the longer that you get out here. And so much of it just comes down to like almost all the opportunities that I've gotten has just been like through people that I've met and just like kind of random occurrences that like happen.
Good. So be nice to people.
Yes.
This is what I say all the time. Don't wait for somebody to tell you can do it. Go do it.
Yeah. And show up on time.
Show up on time. That's a really, really wonderful tip there.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me again. Jeff, tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Instagram at El Jefe Martillo. Yeah. And you can find the movie on the website, liveordieInLaHonda.com, and check out the Facebook page, Live or Die in La Honda.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely check that out. You can see the movie on YouTube, iTunes, Amazon. You can also check out our show on iTunes. You can download the podcast. You can watch it here on podcast or on Popcorn Talk here on YouTube. And another great podcast for you would be Conversations with Maria Menounos. Of course, she's one who's ahead of our studio here. So definitely check that out and give her some love. And we will see you guys next time on the Fly Filmmaking.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.